This is 1861, the North Central College podcast. It's the latest way at North Central where you can hear a few exceptional stories about people who characterize and define the Cardinal community. On the second episode of 1861, we're joined by Carius and Frank Gramarosso. We hope you will take us with you on a walk, a run, a drive, a quiet morning with a cup of coffee, or however you consume your podcasts. We're excited about the podcast journey, and we're so glad that we have you as an audience. A North Central education, of course, has long been about exploring multiple perspectives, asking questions, and engaging in dialogue. And that's what we're going to do on this episode and every episode. We're going to engage in dialogue. And with that, we say hello to Carius and Frank Gramarosso.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So glad to have you on 1861, the North Central podcast. Both of you have such a special relationship, and we could go on for a long time about accolades. 31 national championships, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of alumni through the programs that you coached. But what's special about the relationship between the two of you?
Go ahead, you first.
Well, I think what's special is, bottom line is that we're friends, okay? And a friendship is something that's very, very, very special. I've always said I know a lot of different people in my life. Come in contact with a lot of different people, but I really have very few real friends. And so Frank is one of those, dear friends that you can confide in, talk to, and I think that's the definition that I would, say was the glue for us.
Frank?
I didn't come here looking for a job. I came here to find out about Al being recruited by Northwestern, where at the time I was no longer coaching in high school, but I was recruiting for my old coach, trying to stay in the game, and he told me he was retiring, and then, there were obviously a lot of people that were being searched, and when I found out that they were looking with Al, we were coming to this room for a weight room to work out and built that friendship. I knew him as a high school coach. I knew of the program, but I wanted to find out, is he going to be the next coach at Northwestern? Because what does that do for me? And then when he told me sometime in December that I'm turning that job down, I'm going to stay at North Central, why don't you come and coach here? And I could tell you the job offer was for $900, but I jumped at the chance.
I'm surprised we had that much money.
So you mentioned this room. I should tell our audience we've come on location with the podcast. We're in the Cardinal room, which this is a room that has a lot of history over the years at North Central. But Frank, you talked about coaching, and you mentioned Northwestern. You both had opportunities to coach at places other than North Central. There were D1 opportunities out there for both of you. Why did you stay?
It was the friendship. Countless times at our national convention, especially in our later years, young coaches would come up and ask, why are you still at North? And when I was an assistant coach, why are you still? And then associate coach. It's the love that we've had for what we're doing, and you couldn't find that anywhere else. I had very few interviews at other positions, but it was just home, staying here, and the friendship that we built, and then the mission that we had to continue. I showed up after Al had 6 cross-country titles, and our goal was to make track and field like cross-country.
Al, why did you stay?
Well, I think that you could write books on that because there's many, many, many reasons, but I think it boils down to things happening in my life, number one, and number two, with time I began to realize that philosophically, North Central College was an opportunity for me to really do what I felt was most important, in in education, and that is to have everybody and anybody that loved track and cross country to have the opportunity to be a part of a program and not be restrictive because of performance or times or places, but because of the opportunity that the education here and the athletic experience was going to provide for them for their life. And that became increasingly more and more and more important to me, to see that we could do that here at North Central College.
So you talked about philosophy. I can't let the conversation go without asking you to talk about Run for Fun and personal bests. What does it mean? What did it mean when it started? How has it evolved? What does it mean when alums of the program talk to you today?
Run for Fun and personal best. Really, again, there's books about that concept and everything. I think two different coaches had major influences on my life and that philosophy. One was my experience at the University of Kansas when I went there for one semester. And, I came to realize that while I was there, that it was a job and a business, and that what was most important was your performance. And that bothered me, because when I was in high school, I competed in athletics because I loved it. I wanted to be with my friends, and it was fun. And I really, I left Kansas after one semester. It was nothing wrong with the program or the school or the coach. It was really me philosophically feeling like I didn't fit in. And luckily, when I transferred to the University of Illinois, I had the opportunity through my coach there, Phil Coleman, who was a two-time Olympian and great steeplechaser, and he introduced me to Ted Hayden, University of Chicago Track Club coach. And when I met Ted Hayden, he was the exact opposite of what I experienced at Kansas. At Kansas, it was about times, performances, places, and just winning. It wasn't about the personalities. And when I met Ted Hayden, he was all about what he could do and the sport could do to help the athlete to be enriched in their life. And that really had a profound impact on my life, because I think, in my opinion, that's the most important thing about sport, are the relationships that are formed and the life values that you develop through the experience of being in the program. So I could do that and teach that at North Central College. So that's a big umbrella, Run for Fun and personal best. I wanted to be fun, and I wanted to help each individual within the program, regardless of how good they were, to have the opportunity to be the best that they could be.
I would like to put out a plug for any runner who listens to this to get Jim Canato's book on Ted Hayden. It is fabulous. He gives credit for Al for years, because Jim is a writer. He's written many books, and he took on the task from Al, saying, "Why don't you write a book about Ted Hayden?" And it's fabulous. It's a fabulous book, and it goes through so many things of the life of cross country and track and field in Chicagoland area, and all the athletes from around the country who were part of the University of Chicago Track Club that were never here for training, but bought into that philosophy that Ted Hayden was sharing with everyone.
We'll put information about the book at the end of the podcast for people, so that they have quick access to the book. We'll make sure that we do that. So, Run for Fun and personal bests. There were traditions that are part of the program, that are still part of the program today. Frank, Al, talk about some of those traditions. The candy stripes for running season, the line behind Murner Field House.
Okay, I'll start out with the candy stripes, because when I was at Kansas, and again, it was all about what the athlete could do to help the sport and help the coach win. And when I met Ted Hayden, it was all about what the program and the coach could do to help the athlete. And when I was at Kansas, one of the benefits that I got there was the coach at that time, was looking for ways to stand out and to win. And back then, you didn't have the
photo
the chips
timing and
photo
everything,
timing, anything like that. And you would have pickers, at the end of a 100-yard dash,
Yep.
had to pick, okay, out of 6 lanes or 8 lanes, who got first, second, third, and there are all kinds of mistakes made. And the coach out there, with great wisdom, said, I want to have something that stands out, that can be seen at the finish line, that's distinctive. So he had a distinctive uniform that he created. And I thought when I came to North Central College, I wanted to have a distinctive uniform that stood out, that our own athletes could recognize and anybody else could recognize immediately, during competition. And I don't know, and I just thought, well, candy stripes is a good beginning. So we started with the candy stripes.
Yeah,
Frank?
I mean, that tradition we kind of brought into track and field too, with cross country wore the candy stripe top and a red shorts at that time. And I decided that for track we would, when they started making candy stripe shorts, we reversed it and wore a red top with candy stripe shorts, and then we decided to wear a white top to travel to nationals and things like that. So that kept that striped position. Unfortunately, when Nike started supplying us with some goods, they weren't making any stripes, and they knew that the stripes were, tradition for cross country, and they knew cross country runners were on the track team. So when we were getting track and field gear, we did away with the stripes, for track, because we were getting Nike gear, and to get Nike gear, you wore Nike gear.
Yeah, of course. Talk about the famous red line behind Murner Fieldhouse and what that meant and how you talked to student athletes about that.
Well, that was something that I did really for myself personally and for the team. I wanted to remind myself and to remind the athletes when they crossed that red line and came into Murner Fieldhouse, they should have their focus be on being the best student athlete that they could be, best student they could be, best athlete they could be. However, it's the line of balance. When they cross that line going home or leaving Murner Fieldhouse, I wanted them to forget about athletics and try to be, focus on the rest of their life. And so I call that the line of balance. And I wanted the athletes to know that they were more than just, again, a time or a place. They were holistic, a whole person, a mind, a body, and a spirit, and not just an athlete.
That all seems to play into what we know as the Division III playing field, if you will. How did that serve how both of you coached? Frank, why don't you start and talk about Division III, the mentality, what that means, how that helped the programs that you coached?
It starts with, obviously you have to try to get the best talent that you can, and without athletic scholarships that becomes a challenge. But if you get the right people, going way back to a trophy that's up there with the no names, if you get the right people and you're doing the right things and they buy into what you're trying to do, success can be unbelievable, and you don't have to have all the credentials that some high school athletes do have. We really prided ourselves on developing, especially in distance running, developing those distance runners into high-level competing athletes. And I think it's with the sharing and the honesty and the love that you showed as a coach and the caring that you had as a coach. And it wasn't about the money and the scholarships and all that stuff, even though, when Nike came in, you got to survive somehow. But it's trying to find those athletes that fit in.
Let's talk about the love and care and the athletes who did fit in. There are quite literally legions of graduates who competed with you, competed for you. What would you say to them today as they're out on their own life journeys? They always come back and talk about the impact that the two of you had.
Well, there's a sign hiding somewhere that says we build winners in life.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously we're both very pleased of those coaches out there that were part of the program, but also, you know, the teachers, the lawyers, all the professions, building winners in life. The challenges that they faced as athletes, they face in their real life endeavors. That means the most to us. You know, it's nice to have the trophies and the medals and the rings, but, you know, dealing with people and building their confidence and building a winner out of them. They might not have won. You know, there's thousands of guys who probably never got a conference medal or went to nationals, but they learned how to be a winner.
How does that all, go ahead, Al.
You know, that's a interesting, question, and I would say that it goes back to an old saying that you've heard, people have heard.
Yep.
People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And I think what we tried to base our program here on was the greatest glue that you can have in your life for showing that you care and showing that you really love the person for who they are, not for what they can do. And so it goes back to that philosophy that we talk about, run for fun and personal best. So it all fits into the NCAA Division III and what we tried to really represent at and reflect at North Central College, that we really care mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually about the student athletes that come through our program, regardless of how fast they can run.
And while you both have retired from coaching, we have the great joy of seeing you on campus all the time. You're still very connected to the program. How has that mindset persisted in the program even today?
Well, this senior class was our last class.
Yeah.
And a couple of them stayed on even longer. But, Coach Sinnott was one of our athletes, and, he's doing what he needs to do for the program based on what we've done in the past and based on new things that he may be trying. So, at some point, we're not going to know anybody here anymore, but we still come to Noon Club to lift weights with some of the coaches that are still here, and my son just graduated, and I would come to some of his practices or meets, and our hearts are still with North Central. Things have changed quite a bit, but there's still that love of what we built, and to see that continue. I think it was a great honor in track for Gabe Rivera was the regional coach of our Midwest, it's still the Midwest region,
yes.
But the Wisconsin schools are now in the North region. But, it was great to see him have that honor only 3 years into being the head track and field coach.
Yeah, we want to continue to show support for what goes on at North Central College. But, we did not, and I certainly thought about it many times, did not want to interfere with the current program or, they had to have the opportunity to gain their own traction without us interfering and micromanaging what was going on. But so it's that balancing act of, again, showing support but not interfering.
Frank, you mentioned you had kids who went to school here. Al, you did too. What advice did you give them as they were coming to North Central, and what advice would you give to prospective students now as they're searching? We're in a competitive marketplace. They're, so often student athletes, they have big dreams about the kind of school they go to, and yet North Central continues to thrive. What advice would you give? What advice did you give to your own kids?
I could go on and on about this because it's a kind of hard question to answer. But, what I'd love to have, my children come to North Central College, yes. But did I want them to come to North Central College? Not necessarily, because I wanted them to be able to grow up to be their own person, without, thinking that they had to live up to some kind of image of what I might have represented at North Central College. So I remember, one of my sons, that was looking at North Central College, and we're going to come to North Central College, and I was excited about that. It was going to be great. However, I really felt uncomfortable about him coming to North Central College because, again, then I thought that other students might treat him a little bit differently, and he couldn't really be himself. And I remember, I think it was in July, he expressed an interest in going to another institution, and I jumped all over that opportunity to try to get him to another institution, because I thought he's got to be able to grow up independently without having people expecting him to be a certain way.
Yeah, my daughter didn't want to. She must have looked at. We were just talking about that the other day with another couple. I think my wife took her to 18 schools.
Yep.
And finally, at the end, she goes, I'm going to go to North Central.
Yeah.
And my son never looked anywhere else. He wanted to come here because you look at some old pictures. He started, I think, around 8th grade, even sooner than that, started traveling with us,
Yep.
going to meets.
Yep.
Actually, it was Hal Wilde that mentioned that to me about, talking about children
Yes.
and what you do as a parent and
Yes.
what do you do for work. And that struck a chord. We started taking Dominic to national meets and
Yes.
taking him around. And I remember one of the first when we used to go to Kenosha when we were on trimesters, and we had time.
Yes.
We had preseason, a real preseason, and we drive up there and run at Kenosha, and then we go to Subway and get a sandwich, and then you're at the hotel going to the pool, and then you run the next morning and and my son said, "Is this what you do for your job?"
Yes. You made
so
it look easy.
He always wanted to come to North Central, but like Al was saying, his freshman year I was the head coach of cross country and track and field, and that was a challenge of now you're going to be coaching your son. Same thing.
Yeah.
How are the other athletes going to look at it and that? But then I retired after that, and he's been with it in good hands.
I always thought of Dominic as really like an assistant coach
Yeah,
that we had.
I know.
He was very insightful.
You're the one who blew up his
Yeah,
brain,
he had
I mean.
great intuition, and he would come
Yes.
up with observations.
He did.
That really helped us
Yeah.
to become better coaches.
Yeah, you're right. When we were traveling on the bus, and
Yeah.
whether we won or lost or whatever, all the coaches had a statement to make, and Dominic, had some great insight for us. It was great traveling with him to all our meets that he could go to.
Yeah.
Can't take him out of school too much.
Right. So what advice would you give to somebody maybe you don't know as well, somebody who isn't family? What advice would you give them these days in their college search?
Well, we always and still talk about North Central as a special kind of place,
Yes.
wherever that came from. And I know over the years things have changed, and
Yeah.
but I think we've been out of the loop, or at least I feel like I've been out of the loop so much. I don't know the faculty. I don't pay attention to what's going on that much, except for athletics. But it was a great institution for me. I met my wife here, and my children went to school here, and I have nothing but good things to say about it. But times change, things change, and you're not in tune to what's really happening. Is the name going to change, and this, that, and all those things? But
Sure.
Through the recruiting process, we weren't lying with what things we said about North Central. We believed in it.
Yeah, and I really love that saying, North Central College is a special kind of place.
Yes.
Because it makes it a special kind of place because of special kind of people that are in the right positions. And the people that are in those positions really sincerely care holistically, mind, body, and spirit about, the students that and athletes that they coach. So my advice would be, talk to the people within the program and kind of get a sense of, how involved they are with people's lives.
What do you think has changed over the years about coaching?
You go ahead.
Shoes are banned now. I mean, the technology, it was cinder tracks and then all-weather tracks and, just the technology. Now the technology's in the shoes. COVID, six years of school. It's just, I don't know if I could coach like that today like I used to.
That's an interesting question, and again, there are books being
Yes.
written, about that. In my opinion, what has changed dramatically is I think that too often in too many different places we've separated academics from athletics and athletics from academics, and we're emphasizing, putting an emphasis too much on money and winning rather than what we're doing in young people's lives to help them to adjust to life's realities. And so I think that professionalism has somehow crept into athletics and in too many ways that have really interfered with what I think is the most important thing about athletics, and that is what you're doing in the young person's life to help them spiritually, mentally, physically, to adjust to the challenges that are going to exist in their life. Give them inner strength.
You both had the opportunity to coach, and we talked about this earlier, but 31 national championships, and those national championships crossed a number of decades. What would both of you say were keys to that level of success? 19 in cross country, 6 in indoor track, 6 in outdoor track. And Frank, you mentioned it earlier, there were 6 cross country national titles here before you arrived, and you really wanted to build a track and field program that paralleled what was happening here in cross country. So what were the keys to that success?
The keys is always trying to build a staff with very, very little money.
Yeah.
Even when I became full-time in 85, 86 school year, even though I was the job was threefold for coaches. You had to teach X amount of credits, you were a recruiter, and you coached, and you coached 2 sports. That was it back then. But it's trying to get the right people, and there were some great coaches before me, except they had other jobs. I was Al's first full-time cross-country and track assistant coach.
Right.
I mean, Ken Popejoy was a volunteer coach. You go way back. Jim Walkenheim really helped build that first class to carry us through. But he was football, because again, you had to coach 2 sports. Jim Nichols was Al's assistant, but he worked admissions. So I was the first one, I believe, that full-time reported to Al for cross country and track and field. But beyond my position, it's all the other part-time guys that we paid $500, $1,000, $2,000 to have great assistant coaches. Al tried to model it after football. You got all these position coaches, but don't have the financial backing to have 5, 6 full-time coaches. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, no, you're right on the right track. And I think, one of the things that has kind of changed things a little bit is, we were always teachers in the classroom and coaches. and those two really were integrated together. That when you're in the classroom, you were teaching. When you were coaching, you were teaching. And again, I think by separating those two, I think that kind of changed the emphasis a little bit.
Yeah. But it still was always recruiting.
Yeah.
So what was the pitch?
Let me tell you a President Swing story.
Please,
Yeah.
please. Gail Swing,
Gail Swing.
eighth president of North Central.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. There were other components to that. I was the only person Al was hiring for this job, so you can imagine going through the division chair and going through other people. Is this a job interview, or it seems like you're handpicked? But President Swing, God rest his soul,
Yes.
told me, yes, you went to Northwestern. Yes, you're going to be a associate professor that I came in at, and I came in as an assistant professor, not a lecturer, but you know the real reason why you're here, and that is to bring in students. And when we hosted nationals,
Yes.
as faculty, we had a walk graduation. And after hosting one of our national meets, we were at Larry Gregory's property having
Yes.
a officials end of the meet party, if you want to call it that. And Al, and we were talking, and Gail was there, and Al says, President Swing, yeah, we never called him Gail, it was always President Swing.
Right.
President Swing, Grammy has a challenge here that we don't know what to do. Saturday he's supposed to walk in graduation, but there's the Quad State meet where athletes from Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, he needs to go to Fort Wayne because we're recruiting 4 athletes. And Gail looked at me, and I don't know the amounts at the time, but he said, $10,000 times 4 guys times 4 years, I don't want to see you at graduation. You go to Fort Wayne and get those kids.
Yep.
It was all about bringing in bodies. And Gail, even though President Swing, he supported athletics. Well, you can speak to that, but he never, it was always behind the scenes. Every Monday, Al would meet with them.
Yes.
How many are in baseball? How many are in track? He wanted to know what the numbers were. Am I right?
Yeah, there was the reality of tuition dollars that, I always told people that track and cross country were, revenue producing sports. And said, what do you mean you're revenue producing sports? People aren't paying to come watch a cross country meet, and they're not paying to watch track. I say, we're revenue producing sports because of the tuition that is brought to the institution with every student that we enroll at North Central College.
You've tied things together in nice ways here. It's always been about enrollment. It's about having students. But what you have talked about here is the idea that when students are here, what is the care that they receive from the faculty in the classroom and the staff and the coaches? That is persistent throughout the history of this institution. And that's one of the things that has really seemed to make a difference, and both of you embodied that. And I think the alums who are in the program, who are teachers and coaches and all of the other things, Frank, that you mentioned, they've taken that and translated that into their own lives, which is a credit to you. But it started here with that experience, right?
Absolutely. The fundamental foundation of the life values that will help enrich them, not only while they're here, but for the rest of their life. And that's what the program has always been really focused on, ultimately.
Yeah.
What was your first memory for each of you when you first arrived at North Central? First memory?
Wow, go ahead.
Your first memory's in the 60s. I don't know if I can remember that far back.
One of the first memories that I had, was going to my first divisional meeting and hearing at that time that the statement that we did not have enough money to buy chalk And that was kind of disturbing to me, and I kind of thought, wow, what's the solution to this? And so that's one of the first memories. And then from that point on, it was really the evolution of countless people contributing to help us to navigate through some very difficult times at North Central College to get to this point right now. I mean, I think this is the golden era of North Central College with what's going on, right here. And but it wasn't always that way. And we had a very humble beginning, but it's just tremendously reinforcing and enriching to know, where we're at right now.
One of mine was I was still a high school teacher. Al hired me part-time. And like I mentioned before, Jim Walkenheim, he was assistant football coach and assistant track coach. And before they renovated the offices, in his office, he had a drawing of a championship ring and for track and field. And, he laid the groundwork of being a recruiter, just like Jim Nichols was. And I remember seeing that picture and, that goal that he was trying to achieve, even though he was more football and eventually left because he wanted to be a football coach still. I brought that into not only my part-time work, but when I was hired full-time in '85, that was still a number one goal. And 4 years later, in '89, we win our first indoor and outdoor track championship.
That's why I think this podcast is such an important thing and a way to reach out to the countless people everywhere. You don't have enough time, or I don't, to thank everybody that helped us to get to this point. But it's a general statement to each and every one of our alums and people that have been major contributors to helping us to navigate again to this very, very, very special time in the history of North Central College. And so it's great to say thank you to each one of you, say I love each and every one of you. And I don't have the words to express the deep, profound feelings that I have, for all the people that have enriched my life, enriched our life, and enriched the lives of people that have come to North Central College.
Yeah. And I didn't tell you, I got a message. I sent Steve Stack, All-American pole vaulter, is the head track coach now at Naperville Central, where Steve Wiesbrook was the head track coach, who now is coaching at North Central. I talked him out of retirement to come here and coach with us, and he still is. But Naperville Central, I think, got 6th at the Illinois State meet.
That's right.
And I reached out, and they won the DVC. I reached out to Steve, and he sent a nice message back saying, it's inevitable that they did so well because of what he learned from Al and me and Coach Winder, So getting those messages from those guys is great.
It's a legacy that continues. It's an extraordinary coaching tree. I can't say thank you to both of you enough for the opportunity. And I know that the alums of the program, the alums of the institution who got to know both of you really are grateful for the opportunity to hear you talk about the program, the history of the program, your own experiences. So Al, Frank, thank you both so much for being here. Let's do it again soon, if that's all right with both of you.
Just give
Fine with me.
Give us a topic. Questions are great.
We will do just that.
And I want to thank everybody who will listen in and reach out.
Yeah, and I wish there were more powerful words that I could express, because I don't have the words to be able to do it again. But Jim, you said it. Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you.
I think sometimes that does the trick. It's from the heart.
Yeah.
It's from the heart, Al.
It's from the heart. That's the key. You're right.
It's from the heart. It's from the heart. I can see it in your eyes.
You're right.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, to listening and taking us with you on 1861, the North Central College podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.
All right.
Wrap it up.